All right, well, I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I know it's a busy time of the year, so thank you very much. And I want to thank Pammy and the Lakeville Public Library for having me back. I mean, this is actually a great venue. This is a fantastic room, so thank you very much. So if you didn't already know, my name's Steve Manchester, so I'll give everybody a minute if you want to leave. All right, good. You're in the right place, good. So let me start at the beginning, right? And I'll kind of bring you through. All my books are up over on that side. Obviously, I spend a lot of time writing, and it's what I love to do. It's a passion. But I'm going to go back to the beginning for me. And I didn't realize it was the beginning, but when I was a kid, my grandfather was an amazing storyteller. Like, he was an old swamp Yankee. In fact, you know, that's what we call him, right? So I come from Westport, Massachusetts. And my grandfather would tell stories. And I remember being a kid, it was almost stereotypical, but you know, you'd be at the base of the rocking chair listening to this guy. He could make you laugh, make you cry. And I remember being a kid thinking, words have a lot of power. They have a lot of power to move people or you know, inform them or whatever. So I don't realize at the time that I also am a storyteller, right? And what's funny about that is as my kids get older, they're also storytellers. Two of them don't know it yet, but they are, right? It's just something that, you know, that gets passed down, or it's something you're born with. So, and I'm not saying we don't develop that, but we'll get into it. So fast forward, you know, a few years, I graduated from high school. I actually joined the Army National Guard. I was military police. I worked for the police department for a while. And at 19, I took a job at Southeastern Correctional Center in Bridgewater. There are times today where I'll go to conferences and I'll get up and speak, and everybody in the room wants to know, you know, where did you learn how to write? Where did you go to college? Was it a university? Did you, you know, learn overseas? And I tell people I learned how to write at Southeastern. And I've had people tell me, well, that's a fantastic college. And I'm like, yeah, it's actually a medium security prison that's closed down that was in Bridgewater, right? So my training, and obviously, you know, a lot of fools are self-taught, but I went back to school. I took classes on writing. I am a voracious reader, and I love to read. In fact, the older I get, the slower I read, because I really love words and how people put them together and the segues and transitions and everything. So, but I remember, you know, being in the prison, and I'm thinking, you know, 20, 30-year career. Let's see how far I can take this. I have a family, you know, everything's good, the money's good, benefits, and we get activated. So picture, it was Christmas night, so not Christmas Eve, but Christmas night of 1990. I get a call from my platoon sergeant, Steve. We just got activated. We're going to Operation Desert Shield. So I think this guy's had too much eggnog. I start laughing. He said, it's no joke, we're actually gonna go. So we ended up going up to Fort Devens. We trained, I think, for almost 2 months on 3 inches of ice for desert warfare, which was somewhat bizarre. Fortunately, most of the people that I served with, men and women, were either in corrections, the police department. There was a lot of law enforcement and, you know, civilian, in their civilian occupations. I think we're going to be sent stateside, and there's a reason that I tell these stories. I'm not going to get into the graphic detail, but I think we're actually just going to backfill, probably go to Oklahoma for a year while they send, you know, the regular Army troops out, and it doesn't work that way. We actually get on a C-5A Galaxy. If you can picture this, second largest aircraft of the world, in the world, nose open, tail opens, 8 Greyhound buses side by side on the bottom deck is what it can fit. Instead of the buses, we actually put in Humvees with trailers, lock and load 50 caliber machine guns up top, and we go into the desert. It takes 18 hours to fly in. At the time, I'm 23 years old, so I'm considered an old man, right? I'm getting ready to get out of this thing, right? And there's kids with me that are 17, 18 years old, but you know, I have a ton of confidence. I worked in the prison. I've never shied away from any type of conflict, so you know, let's go get this done. What I don't realize is the Arabian Desert at the time, Saddam Hussein said it would take us 6 months to get through the breach. And if you can picture the breach, we were actually located in the northernmost part of Saudi Arabia. Berm of sand, so this big mountain of sand about 60 feet off the desert floor. On the other side of it are all these landmines and oil trenches and all this other craziness where he says, you know, we're going to tear you people up once you come in. Does anybody want to guess? And again, he predicted 6 months. Anybody want to guess how long it took us to get through?
100 hours.
That's actually how long the war took. It took us 17 minutes. And my job as an MP was to collect what we call EPWs, enemy prisoners of war. But the first 3 days, Cajun style, I mean, there was nothing that was alive. And as we came through, I suddenly realized, like, I've never seen anything in my life. No matter how bad the prison was or you know, places that I've been, this is unreal. And it started to get progressively worse, right? So there are civilians that are involved in war, and again, without getting into the graphic detail, Here's where my life changes. So I'm 23, and my platoon sergeant, who's also a Vietnam veteran, asked me to take him to an evac hospital. He's having problems with his knees in northern Saudi Arabia. We're in Iraq. We're about maybe 80, 90 miles, into Iraq. He wants to go to Saudi Arabia. I say, yeah, I think I had 12 hours off. I'll take you. We'll go for a ride. You can get patched up, and then we'll come back. But we had to do it before the night fell, right? Because the Republican Guard, which were the Iraqi fighters, were coming out at night, and they were scouting too. So we get in this Humvee, and this is where my life changes. And it's funny, like the older I get, I start to tell this story now, and maybe for a few years too, because of the trauma of it, I didn't realize that it spun me the way that it did. But we get in the Humvee, I do a radio check, both weapons, we have water, whatever, we're good for 16 hours. I start, and if you look at the way that the roads were cut, they were actually cut in the shape of a snake. And the reason for that is they don't ever pave roads out straight in case there's an air raid, right? They can just hit a convoy straight on. So you actually do one of these. I'm moving, I'm maybe doing 60, 70 miles an hour, which is really, really fast in the desert. He's on the right of me, he's actually buckled in, I'm not buckled in. I don't even think I have my helmet on. I'm smoking a cigarette. We're just, buzzing along, and I'm just talking to him. All of a sudden, we hit a dust storm or a sandstorm. And if you've never experienced that, it's actually like taking a can of Tang, orange Tang, and throwing it in your face. The visibility is zero. But I don't get off the throttle because if we slow down and I can't get there and back in time, we're in trouble at night. Anyway, long story short, if it's not too late, I hear a bang. I look up, I see the windshield spider, and the world does one of these things, right? I get cracked in the back of the head. Basically what happens is I hit a boulder with the right front tire, and I actually rolled the Humvee, flipped it. I get thrown out of the Humvee. The driver's side smashes, I actually crushed the whole thing, and passenger side, he's hanging upside down like a bat. When I came to, first thing I looked at was my fingers, and for whatever reason, I still had I still had all 10 fingers, but I was missing my wedding ring. So I'm thinking, this is unbelievable. But in the desert, the sand is not like Horseneck Beach. It's as fine as powdered sugar, right? So at first I'm like, I'm kind of dazed, and I look over, he's hanging upside down, so I cut him out. I end up treating him for shock, and then I get on the radio, and I call, Bucky 13, this is Swamp Yankee 147. I'm trying to give grid coordinates. The antenna's buried because the thing's up on its roof, crushed, right? So we don't have any. So I'm like, oh my God. So suddenly, 5 minutes turns into a half hour, turns into 4 hours, and I get reduced to like a 5-year-old, right? Because I know he's all, he's cooked. We need a medevac to get him out. He's pretty hurt. And I'm thinking, if it gets dark, we're in trouble. We're in big, big trouble. An American came by, he ended up leaving us. And then there was a second gentleman that came and actually threw us on the skids of a chopper and got us out of there, right? That night, my entire platoon came out and looked for us. And they ended up finding the Humvee stripped clean. So the Iraqis had come and stripped everything out of it, right? So this is where things changed for me, right? Now, I didn't even know what trauma was until that happened. And I remember being in the evac hospital, and I'm a clown. That's who I am, it's what I've always been, I'm a clown. So I laugh everything off, and I continue to laugh everything off. But all of a sudden I can't sleep, right? And I can't eat, and when you look at me, that's a problem, right? I can't eat, I can't sleep. There's some issues going on, right? And I remember, standing in the middle of the biggest ashtray in the world, right? And I'm smoking a cigarette, and I'm thinking, not if, but when I get out of here, I'm going to chase down my dream. No matter what it takes, I'm going to fight, right, to make this life worth living, right? It's not going to be, I need to do this because of a paycheck, or I need to do that. I'm always going to be responsible to my family. That's never going to change. But I need to make something of myself, right? At least when I look back, I can say, I did this. And my biggest fear was to be locked in time in 1991, right? Where all of a sudden my whole life becomes about Operation Desert Storm. I didn't want that. In fact, I fear that more than anything else. I promised myself, when I get out of here, I'm going to chase my dream down. It was to become a published author. I also know at the time, the rejection rate is 97%. Things have significantly changed in the industry, and I think for the better, right? When I first get started, you talk about subsidy presses, vanity presses, self-publishing, forget it, right? You were absolutely blackballed. It was a horrible thing. So you had to bide your time and keep, doing what you're doing. Today, much, much different. And Amazon has changed a lot of things, right? The industry, not all for the better, but people are actually getting their stories out. So anyway, I come home, I go back into the prison, I end up getting promoted to investigator. I worked there for about 5-6 years as an IPS officer. Probably the best team that the best people I've ever worked with in my life. But I'm just dying inside. Like, I can't heal from what happened over there while I'm still in this prison, right? So I was almost at the 10-year mark, and people will tell you if you do 10 years in a day, you're staying for your career, because you'd be insane to leave when you look at the retirement, all this other stuff. Before it's over, law enforcement career is done. My first marriage is done. House is gone. I have a son who's 3 years old, who I commit myself to, obviously, right? I pride myself on being a good dad more than anything else in the world. But in order for me to survive what I experienced in the Gulf War, within just a 6-month period of time, I actually had to reinvent myself completely, right? So when you talk about post-traumatic stress disorder, for me, it's a label, it's invisible, there's negative stereotypes, all this other stuff. I get up now and I speak about it. 10, 15 years ago, I would have never, ever stood up here and told you that I suffered from that. And I don't now, right? I'm not saying it can't come back, I don't now. But what it took me to get to where I am today, I take more pride in that than anything I've ever done, ever. Right? So you come back, depression, anxiety, severe panic attacks. I'd be in the prison. The only time I ever felt comfortable is when we had some type of fight or altercation, because then I could actually justify why I felt the adrenaline rushes. Sitting home on my couch, absolutely insane. So I stopped writing, right? And the only thing I know about writing is I'm writing these type, almost like police reports, right? And I started to get pretty good at it. And then I started to become known for, this is what everybody kind of has a specialty, right? Steve, interview and interrogation, and I do a lot of the write-ups, right? So I became good at it. And then it almost became a challenge to me. And at the time, I read and read and read and read. And I knew that in order for me to be a successful writer, I need to fill my toolbox up, right? Vocabulary, grammar. I actually need to, and when I teach kids, I tell them the same thing. If you're not reading, don't ever plan on writing. I mean, you need, to fill that up. So I started writing. One of the smartest things I ever did is I took on a pen name, Stephen Herbert. So when I look back now on some of my earlier books, I absolutely cringe because I'm like, oh my God. Hopefully nobody's ever read this. I think there was only like 7 people anyway. But when I look at the whole thing in its entirety, there was a reason that I did it. It was awesome for me to do it. I had to make my bones that way. But there were 3 or 4 books that I had written under the pen name, and I'm glad that it was under the pen name, right? Because I need to learn how to do it. There are people that will tell you, regardless of what industry you're in or whatever, creative arts that you do, it takes 25 years to become a master. I used to think that was bull. I don't anymore. And it's almost like you have to figure out who your voice is. Like, there's no way, I think, at this point in the game, and any writer in the room, and there's a few of you hear the word plagiarism, you're like, oh my God, you know what I mean? Like, that's, I don't even think it's possible for me to plagiarize work now, because I am so locked into my own voice, into my own style. You know what I mean? Like, it's now when I'm working on a book right now, and when I'm writing the book, it's almost like it's being told to me, because it's just kind of like flowing through, right? So I have the process down, and I love it. I just absolutely love that piece of it. So here's where it gets good. I end up, redefining myself. I go back to school. I finish my degree. I also realized in order to make money as a writer, I'm also going to need to pick up a paper route, probably work at the ice cream stand, do a bunch of other stuff. So I need to go find the day job, and I do. And that was funny. I sat at the base of this long conference table, boardroom table, right, up in Boston, corporate America, last place in the world I want to be. But I know if I get into corporate America, I'm going to have, there's no passion there, right? So you have me for the day. I'm going to do my job and be honest, and then all of it's going to go into the writing, and it did for years. But I remember sitting at the end of the table, and I'm like, everything is law enforcement, military, like, you have no background in this. I said, well, I can't make any, you can train me. I'm right from scratch, right? What I can tell you is I'll do a good job for you. So she hires me, I end up doing my thing, right? In the meantime, I start writing. And I start writing and writing and writing. And what I find is the first 2 books that I wrote, one was called 6'5", A Different Shade of Blue, written under a pen name, Stephen Herbert. 6'5" in the prison system basically comes from San Quentin. If you walk down death row, if the warden comes down with the chaplain to grab the guy in room number 1, right, to go to the chair, he'll scream down the tier, 6 moving to 5. What that means is 5 goes to 4, everybody comes up 1 cell, right? On the street, when you hear 5-0, that comes from Hawaii 5-0. That means the police are around us now, whatever you're doing, take it easy, right? In the prison, if we come in as officers or whatever into a block or into a rec yard or whatever, and somebody screams 6'5", it means that somebody else is doing something illicit, stop what you're doing, right? We have the cops that have rolled in. A different shade of blue also meant as a comparison to the police profession. I sat at BCC taking a class, and in the back of the class, guy's name is Barry McKee, changed my life. Right, so I got it up in my head, this is what I'm gonna pursue. I'm like 24, 25 years old taking this class, right? All the kids are up front, 17, 18, you're all gonna be troopers and cops and all this other. I'm like, oh my God. I'm just like what time's lunch? I need these 3 credits, right? So he's talking, finally I raised my hand, I said, listen, all you talk about is the police, right? Cops, cops, cops. You can go home, turn on the TV, you can learn about any, police you wanna learn, right? There's 7 different channels running it. You can, cops, all these other shows. I said probations, parole, the court system, corrections. You don't talk about the criminal justice system. He says to me, come see me after class, Steve. So I'm thinking, well, I'm taking this next semester, right? I'm gonna have to take this class again, whatever. I go to see him in class. He says to me, the only books ever written on corrections were written from the perspective of murderers. I'm not teaching it in my class. If you're so smart, why don't you write it? All right, and I did. And it was painful. And it took me about 18 months. And I got it done, and I handed it over to him, and he was like, yeah, this is good. And he lied, because it wasn't good. But it was my start, right? And what I did was I finally figured out that, hey, I can do this, right? I've never done. People ask me all the time, hey, how do I become a writer? Well, usually if you take and I'm not trying to be cocky by saying this, but take a pad of paper and a pen, apply some pressure, right? That's how you write. So you don't have to be, have gone to Yale or, some of the best writers I've ever read are unpublished. Some of them are going to remain unpublished because the industry is so brutal. But when I look at somebody's background, it does not define what kind of writer they are. There's some very young people that I've read that are just absolutely amazing. The problem with them is the content's just not, they don't have the experience, right? So anyway, I ended up writing this book, 6'5", A Different Shade of Blue. And I'm thinking, I've made it. Yeah, I've made it. Then I learned, the only thing I learned is I actually am stubborn enough to sit at the table and finish this. So let me write another book called The Unexpected Storm. And it's the second book on the table, right? And this is a catharsis. So this is my story. Really, really strange because I write it almost like it's a novel. So I wrote it in the third person, right? Billy Valley is the main character. Very long story short, the publisher, they actually took a compositor, somebody from Sweden, I think it was, who doesn't get my sarcastic wit, starts making changes to the book. Now I start to learn a different part of the industry. Then you have to make decisions. Do I compromise? Because I'm not going to sell my soul, but do I, give them my little finger so I can get one step further, right? And this is how the journey, starts to begin. The Unexpected Storm, average print count at the time, we're talking 15 years ago, 2,000 books. Cover price, $20. Industry standard in the United States, not Europe, because they subsidize their artists. They're actually pretty good to their writers and painters and poets. In the United States, at the time, 15% was the take on the cover. So $3 to me. $3 times 2,000, $6,000 before the ex-wife and Uncle Sam comes calling, right? And then I learn a lesson there. I can't write for money. It's either in me to do this, and I'm not saying money's not going to become part of this, because it needs to be at a certain point, but that can't be the start of it. I write The Unexpected Storm, and it actually helps to heal me. Becomes a catharsis, right? And the thing I love most about that book is I was asked to speak at a couple state houses, right, during the 10-year anniversary of the liberation of Kuwait. I actually chose Rhode Island as the closest, right, easiest ride. I go to Rhode Island, I get up, I'm thinking, and it was like senator, congressman, all these politicians, and they kept pushing me to the back of the line. So by the time I speak, nobody's going to be in the audience, which is fine anyway. First 2 rows, all Desert Storm veterans, right? Some of them disabled, some of them don't have limbs, and the ones that look whole are the ones that I can relate to, because I can see in their faces that they've also paid a heavy, heavy price. First book I ever wrote on post-traumatic stress disorder, right? But I try to bury it or try to hide myself by putting it in the third person, putting another person's name on it. It doesn't work that way. Eventually everything's going to come out, right? And only when you start to really talk about it, and I talk a lot about PTSD now, is you have to, I mean, you almost have to be honest about it. You got to own it, right, and then go get it, right? So I end up writing about the prison system. I read about my war experience, nonfiction, both of them, right? I then realized I don't know anything. I've exhausted everything I know. So in order for me to continue to write, short stories, poetry, and I love poetry, believe it or not. I actually love writing poetry, and novels. I am not skilled enough to write a novel at the time. I know that. I know that when I write nonfiction, I need to become an expert, or at least prove myself to be an expert. It's not about, the level of writing. When you write fiction, you are competing against the best writers in the world, right? So you have to be on your game. I learned that early on. I also understand it. I start writing. I decide that I am not going to give away any of my books. So at the time, and I used to joke with people, I say Random House or the Poorhouse. New York City, Avenue of the Americas, 6th Avenue. When you come down, there was a time where there were 15 or 20 enormous publishing houses. There are now 5, right? They've all kind of merged together just to try to survive because Amazon's taken over the world. I decide, Random House or the Poorhouse. I write 5 novels. Probably number 4, number 5, decent, right? First 3 needs some work. But I'm writing. And I'm actually learning how to write as I'm doing it. I end up meeting this gentleman by the name of Lou Aronica. Now, I'd had some other published works done, Chicken Soup for the Soul. There was other smaller stuff. And for me, it's about momentum and confidence. So you need some wins. They don't have to be up here. I mean, you need something to keep you going, right? At a certain point, it's a very frustrating process, right? It's people that have never done it. It's brutal. I mean, you have to say, well, I'm going to fail. No, you're not. You are guaranteed going to fail. And you're going to fail 95, 96, 97 times out of 100. The question is, can you get up the other 3 times? And if you can, this is the game for you. But people don't understand. Like if I wanted to become a doctor or a dentist or an attorney, Steve, here are all the steps to take to become that. I need to go to school for 6 years, 8 years, whatever. I need to do this. How do you become a published author? Brutal. I went back to UMass. There was 16, I think it was 16 professors in the English department. And I don't mean anything by saying this, but one of them had been published. So here I am as an older man, not a kid anymore, and I walk in there and I say, listen, I'm willing to pay. I want to learn. I don't know. So I continue to write. I meet this guy, Lou Aronica. I knock on the front door. I say, hey, listen, I watched this guy. He was the editor-in-chief and the publisher for Bantam Dell and Avon. Spent 30 years in Manhattan. Has a phenomenal career. Put people on the New York Times bestsellers list. Some of them went to #1. Just absolutely created or cultivated these authors. And that's what you want. You don't want a one-shot deal. You want to be cultivated. You want to work with somebody and prove to them, because there's a lot of people that will walk in here and be like, there are some authors or writers that are pretentious, right? And for me, I'd rather be a workhorse than a show horse, right? And a lot of people that I see, especially once people make it to a certain level, it's like trying to cheat on a kid in the 4th grade where they have their hands over their paper. I'm like, come on, this is so tough. Any chance you have to help somebody, then you need to do that, I said to Lou, I have a book called The Rocking Chair. In fact, Swamp Yankee, which was my code sign in the desert, was named after my grandfather. For me, the storyteller, right, walked on water for me. Absolutely. I don't think anybody's ever had the impact in my life that this man has, and he passed when I was 12. I read a book called The Rocking Chair. I felt like he was sitting on the side of me while I was writing it. That's how I knew it was the right book to write. I'm not talking about a religious experience. I'm talking about something spiritual, right, where there's that connection and just, he's almost like he's telling me this story. I write the book. I go to this guy, Lou Aronica. I said, hey, listen, he comes out of retirement. He starts a publishing house called The Story Plant, kind of a boutique publishing house. I'm watching it. He's bringing in Laurel Dewey. He's bringing in certain authors that I like their stuff. They're really, really talented, but they're up and coming. They're not, John Grisham and Jodi Picoult. So I'm watching them, knock on the door. I have this, geez, I really don't have the time right now. What I'm looking for is an editor. So I said, well, I'm an editor. I edit manuscripts. Oh, you do? No. You know what I mean? Industry standard at the time, $3 to $4, double space page. I'll do it for $2. I spent more time on these manuscripts, getting them right, researching, and I don't realize at the time, as I'm doing this, I'm trying to gain favor with this guy, right? So that he can at least open the door and have a conversation with me. This is what it means to me. But I'm also learning how to edit. Like I'm learning how to edit my own stuff, right? So I'm going back to 4th grade. Oh, you can't, you know what I mean? It's amazing, the stuff that you forget. So I do 2 or 3 manuscripts. I say to him, listen, just in case you didn't remember, I also have a manuscript. He says, Steve, I don't, you know what I mean? I'd like to work with you, but I'm not looking for a book. I'm looking for an author, somebody to cultivate. You would have to have multiple works. So let's say I have 5. I said, I have 5. Send me the best one. I sent him the rocking chair. Book comes in, and it's not page count, right? It's word count. Word count for this book, considered a beach read, right around 75,000 words. He reads it, says, this book has phenomenal potential. So I said, so it needs an edit. No, it needs a rewrite. He takes the 75,000, he sends me 3 pages of notes. I remember looking on my laptop thinking, in order for me to work with this guy, right, I'm gonna have to surrender to this. Now, I followed him, I look at his background, he's brilliant. This man is, he's a lot smarter than I am, but I'm a storyteller, right? So can this guy get me to where I need to be, where I can actually get my books out into the world and get a readership? I read the 3 pages. I'm like, nope, not doing it. Get up, take a walk. I come back, I read it again. There's no way I can do this. Get up, take a walk. I come back. Well, maybe he's got a point with just this one thing. I get up, I walk back. I ended up changing close to 30,000 words. Close to 30,000. So 30,000 words out of 75 onto the editing floor. Here's the good news, and people don't understand this because for me it's about the work. I love the work. He's not writing those 30,000 words. I am. So he's providing direction, and hey, by the way, you need to stay on the highway. You keep taking these exits, right, and you're going off, and you know, all of a sudden we get this character that's flying pigeons. I like the guy too, but he's not part of the story. Come on back. So he teaches me how to storyboard and kind of do one of these things as I'm writing. Absolutely brilliant. It takes me about 8 or 10 months to get that done. He says to me, I'm not sure that's the book we should start with. 12 months. Book's written in the 3rd person. He, she, God, looking through a window, right? Knows everything. I know everybody's actions, reactions, what you feel, all the characters. I get to play God as a writer. He says, I think this would be a lot more powerful if it was in the 1st person. Oh, dear God. I'm not doing it. I take my walk, I come back, I do it. The book gets published. I'm in New York City with 2 of my kids and my wife, and he runs a promotion on it. At the time, I think I probably had sold maybe 3, 4, 5,000 books max of everything that I've ever done. 12 months comes out, he says, we're gonna run a promotion on it. At the time, you still had some play with Amazon. For those of you who do write in the room, anything less than 50 reviews, you're not even on the playing field. It's just the way, with the algorithms and all the other stuff they do, it's absolutely terrifying. But at the time, they would still promote books that they didn't publish. And we'll talk about Amazon taking that over too. But so he ends up running a promotion. The book is ranked at like 12,000 and change. So if you think about it, there's about 4 million books on Amazon. So, 12,000. I'm selling a few. I'm not quitting the day job. I watch it go down to 480. Now we're literally in Times Square, so I'm like 480. Now, if you know anything about the industry, anything in the top 10 makes you a national bestseller, and you only have to stay there for 1 cycle, right? But it has to be paid. It can be electronic or print, but you have to be able to prove that either Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or Kobo in Canada, you made it into the top 10. Screen print, done. And they'll use that for marketing for the rest of your career. I'm in New York City, I'm looking 480, all of a sudden it plummets. The book goes down to like 30 something. So I tell my wife, like, this is nuts. Like, when you look at the authors that were beneath me at the time, like, this is absolutely crazy. 30, again, I could really stretch the story out, but it goes to number 8. I make national bestseller. So now I'm buying, dinner for the family, which, by the way, I was gonna buy dinner for the family anyway. Goes to number 8. I'm beyond excited. Goes to number 2. And I said to my wife, it needs to go, if it doesn't go to number 1, I'd rather be at 8 than number 2, right? Like, if you're in the national bestseller list, it's done. Don't get me to number 2 sniffing for number 1. Goes to number 1. Stays at number 1 for 36 hours. Ahead of J.K. Rowling, John Grisham, all these big time authors, right? I call him. I said, how many books do we sell? He said, 200. Awesome. I can sell balloons, you know what I mean, next time the carnival comes around. 200 print copies. He sold 13,800 electronic copies in a day and a half. The reason I share that story with you is that book is no better than some of the other stuff that I've done, but because things aligned, right? My brother works for NASCAR. Every time you say one of these guys, hey, good luck on the race on Sunday, they start laughing. No such thing as luck. Preparation, opportunity. I control all the preparation. I put the work in, and I'll continue to put the work in. Anybody that I work with, they'll say, well, Steve, this and that. All I can promise you is this. If you can find somebody that can work as hard as I do, take them on, right? I don't write on Sundays. I don't write on my kids' birthdays. I am not so neurotic, you know what I mean, that other things come first. My family comes first. I still have a day job. All that stuff comes first. But while everybody else is watching the Kardashians, right, or driving themselves nuts, you know, through CNN and Fox, I'm on the laptop, right, playing like I'm 8 years old in my head, creating these stories. 13,800 copies. Out of the 5 books, so I signed a 5-book contract with him. Out of the 5 books, 4 of them went to #1, and 3 of them went to #1 on Barnes & Noble, which is like the flea on the back end of an elephant, and then we had that one that went with Amazon. I am praying that Barnes & Noble, Kobo, that they continue to survive, and I pray that the indie bookstores come back, and you know what I mean, because it's amazing what they've done with this industry. 10 years ago, you wanted a book, you ordered it from Amazon. Fulfillment. Fulfill the order, send it to you. All of a sudden, maybe we can make a little more money. Marketing and promotion. If I promote this book, if Amazon gets behind the book, like Oprah Winfrey would, or, you know, The Golden Chalice, all of a sudden, these books are taking off, they're making it into the New York Times bestsellers list. Then they figure, well, what if we print on demand? No more warehousing. We cut out all, you know, years ago in Connecticut, Ingram, warehouses, pallets and pallets of books, right? If you wanted books, if a distributor wanted books, they ordered from the warehouse. Today, you don't need a warehouse. They print on demand. I order a book tonight, they'll print it tonight, they'll send it tomorrow. Nuts. Cutting out all that middle ground. How about this? Why do we need publishers? I just finished the book, and I have some friends who have done very, very well in the industry. Right, and I think what I do well is, and this is funny because when people meet me, right, but because my background is what it is, because I present the way that I present, people, and I guess the best example is 2 years ago, I'm a keynote speaker down the Cape, and I'm sitting in the back of the room, and there's these 2 ladies, one on each side, and they pay to listen to different speakers and get a lunch. I'm the last guy to go up, I'm the anchor man, right? So, and they're looking for a clown, somebody to kind of entertain the crowd, that's what I do. So, I sit back there, I said to one of the women, have you ever heard this guy speak? And she's like, no. I said, he's awful. Absolutely terrible. Are you kidding me? We paid $25 and, you know, I'm like, awful. They announce me, I get up to the podium and I turn around and I start, you know what I mean? And it's just hilarious. But what I do is when I go to conferences and all this other stuff, I talk to other authors all the time, always networking. I won the Los Angeles Book Festival last year in Paris, in the Paris Book Festival with Ashes. My wife and I went to Paris. I almost came home alone, but that's a different story for a different time. I'm just kidding. But what happened is, you know, to walk into these places and you're like, you know, I came from West public school system, worked in the prison system, taught myself how to write, went to classes and kept it, but it was really about perseverance. It was about being so stubborn that I wouldn't leave the table. And I tell my kids all the time, like, and not to be cliched, but you know, you make a wish, and that's cool. You make your wish. You're either going to work for this or you're not. And a lot of people who talk to me about becoming a writer, I say to them, are you willing to put in the work? Because the work is unbelievable if you want to try to make a career out of it and just keep moving. You know, so my kids, and they laugh at me, but I'm like, in order to make something happen, regardless of what it is, you have to put the time in. You have to put the seat time in, you know. Fast forward to this year, I read a book called 3 Shoeboxes. The book becomes the winner of the New York Times Book Festival. Well, the New York Book Festival. My wife and I go to New York City with my little one, who's not little anymore, she's 14. I'm actually, you know, dressed up, and there's a ton of people in the room, and again, I'm the last one to get up and speak, so I have my notes, I'm going through my notes, and they have, you know, Carlos Santana's kids in the corner playing acoustic, and it's fantastic, right? And a bunch of speakers get up, they call me up, I walk up to the podium, I reach into my jacket, I look back to the back of the room, my kid's like this, waving my notes. I'm like, oh yeah. So here's what I say. It is unbelievable. Every victory has to be celebrated because all the failures that lead up to it, right? I think when I look back, whether or not I write 40 more books or I write 4 more, it doesn't, when I look back on my life at the end, and I do kind of back it in a lot, right? And I'll think about it. I take more pride in the fact that I didn't quit. I just kept plugging. I almost can't control a certain amount of whether or not I succeed or don't succeed. Every time something happens where, I get this victory, I'm beyond grateful for it. But the joy for me, it used to be, I'd get done with a book and, the book would get published and I'd throw it up on the mantle, right? You put it up there like a trophy. Look at me, how smart I am, light a fire, maybe order a pizza. Look how smart I am, a new book up on the mantle. That's ridiculous. Now, when I finish a manuscript, I take the family out and we celebrate. And that's my way of saying, I did it, right? And I did it for me, I did it for my family. If it succeeds and something happens with it, then great. You know what I mean? If it doesn't, it might somewhere down the road. All my stuff pretty much has an underlying theme, and people didn't know this when I first got started, but what I write about is family dysfunction, family sagas, right? I write love stories. A lot of times my stuff will be, compared to, because I'm a male author, like Mitch Albom or Nicholas Sparks, they obviously have a much, much bigger readership. But when you read my stuff, it's not male, female all the time. I mean, I think there's nothing better than a good love story, but love stories don't have to be just a man and a woman. It could be a grandmother and a grandson. It could be 2 brothers. Ashes, I take 2 brothers that are estranged for 15 years, hate each other. I put them in a vehicle for 6 days and have them drive across the country. Just to prove that a brother's love is a brother's love, right? The underlying theme for all my stuff is that none of us is ever alone. And I decided that in the desert, right? If my only job, and if I live 60, 70, 80, 90 years, is to have people read my stuff and be like, yeah, I can relate. And I don't feel alone, right? So all the pain, the conditions and circumstances are always going to change with people, but the feelings are the same, right? And you know what I mean? So for me, that's what drives a lot of what I do. We've done some screenplay stuff, independent stuff, which is a lot of fun. Nothing like going to an independent film festival and drinking, cheap wine from a paper cup. Awesome. We've done a lot of stage play work. 3 Shoeboxes actually started off as a stage play. So picture that, right? 15,000 words, like this. Segues, right? I can't have an outside scene. Everything has to happen in here, right? They have these kind of like swivel type set that's happening up on, did it in a small venue. We get done with it. Everybody's crying in the back. I did my job. I write tearjerkers. Maybe 3 months go by, I'm like, I need to do something with this book, or with this story. I don't want it to end there. So I decided I'm gonna do a novel. So if anybody decides to do this, please give me a call so I can talk you out of it, right? When you write this and you take it to this, very doable and actually enjoyable. When you take this and try to do that without fluff, that's a problem. Fortunately, I have my friend Lou Aronica, right, who helps to direct some of it. The Unexpected Storm, Gooseberry Island, and 3 Shoeboxes, all about post-traumatic stress disorder, but not in a preachy way, just telling a story, right? The Unexpected Storm, obviously based on combat or combat experiences. And again, not the John Wayne type of, oh my God, look at this. It's just seeing kids die or trip a landmine. Like there's things that happen to your mind, right? More than your mind, it actually happens to your soul. I finished that, I decided I'm never gonna write about PTSD again. My symptoms have I'm beyond it. Gooseberry Island, guy's a soldier. I actually put him on a rooftop in Afghanistan, looking through a sniper scope for 11 months, never pulls the trigger. Comes home absolutely destroyed. I love the story, but it was also about the military. 3 Shoeboxes, I take the protagonist, the main character, and I take him right to his knees. And the stuff I do to this poor guy, just to get, and this is, you'll appreciate this, Joyce, but to get to a scene where, if I could have written a short story and pulled it off the same way, I probably would have done it and saved the time. The final scene in this book is probably the best piece of writing that I've ever done. And to come up to that and to try to prove to people that, we're all carrying some serious weight, right? Everybody's smiling, you're walking around, but, and it's one of those books where I dug real deep. And I've had people come to me and say, I loved, the rocking chair, but 12 months really bothered me. And I know why it bothered you, right? Or, Goodnight Brian, if you've ever had a disabled child or a disabled grandchild, that's going to bother you, right? Because I'm digging deep. I don't like to go to the shallow end of the pool. Is not worth my time. The fun part is I just turned 51 years old, believe it or not. I know I look like I'm 70. And at 51, I feel like I just got started. And I mean that sincerely. Like, I can honestly tell you that I finally learned how to write. And people think that's crazy. Like, I'll go, and I'll talk to kids, and I'm like, it's just, to me, it's a life that it's either who you are or it's not. Like, when I wake up in the morning, and it's a little bit easier today with the phone, right? So you can put it in notes or whatever. I'll have an idea laying in bed, right? And I'm like, I gotta write this down, because if I lose it, right, it's gone forever. Maybe not, right? I write it down, and then I write this down, and then I write that down. People ask me, are you working on a book? I say, no, I'm tinkering. Tinkering means I don't have 30,000 words yet. As soon as I hit 30,000, I'll admit to people I'm working on a book. But I tell people, we're puzzle makers, right? So I don't know anybody, and maybe somebody in here does it this way, who writes linear, starts at the beginning, writes the whole book, and then finishes the book. Do you?
Sometimes.
That's impressive, because for me, I'm a puzzle maker.
And get it out, then get it good.
Good. That's awesome. And the joy really is in the editing, right? It's just awesome. People ask, well, how long does it take you to write a book? Used to take me 9, 12 months, sometimes 14 months. Now it takes me 6 months if I'm slow. And the reason for it is I've learned how to storyboard, so I have my outline. I am successful because of the characters that I develop, and I know that. I know that the rocking chair, at one point, all of a sudden the dialogue drops off, which surprises me as a writer. And then I think about it. The reason the dialogue dropped off is because the grandfather doesn't have to say anything anymore. He just has to lean in and raise an eyebrow. And everybody's like this, to include the reader. That's how you know you have it, right? It's all for fiction, it's all in the character development, all in the character. And it's an 80-20 thing, right? So my job, 80%, the other 20% on you. If I write about a grandmother, shame on me if I do all of it, 100%. I need to leave room for your grandmother so you can attach yourself and endear yourself to that character. I mean, it's huge. For me, it's a passion. People talk about the work. It's not work. It's, you know what I mean? I suspect, the last day I draw a breath, I'll be writing something down, right? Because I love to do that. But my problem is when I go and speak or I talk to, especially with kids, I'm always thinking like macro, right? Sometimes somebody just wants to write a poem or a short story, or they want to write one book, and that's awesome. You know what I mean? And then there are other people that, want to take it a little bit further. For me, the process is the same, right? First 15 minutes, torture. For the other writers in here, do you feel the same way when you first start writing? Is it torture for you?
I go over that first paragraph 100 times.
Right. When I first start, every time I sit down and write, and I'll always read what I did last, I'll breeze it over, right? And then I start writing. First 15 minutes of torment. And then it starts coming. And it just starts coming. You ever see the movie Finding Forrester? Have you ever seen it? Rent that movie. You probably get it for like $2 now, right? Yeah, and it's actually Sean Connery, and he's a recluse. He didn't win the Pulitzer, but it's something that's supposed to be comparable. This movie is amazing, and he's got this kid that's trying to get into his life to teach him how to write. He's written one book. He's held up in his apartment in New York City. He will not come out. He finally allows the kid to come into his apartment, starts talking to him. So at one point, the kid's at the typewriter, and they're old school, right? So he's just pounding on the keys, and he stops, and he's, kind of doing one of these. So the old man says, what are you doing? She says, well, I'm thinking. Well, you're not supposed to be thinking. You're supposed to be writing. Don't think. And it's so profound, right, when you get further down in your career where it's like, I can analyze this, overanalyze this, or I can be my grandfather and just really pull it out of my backside, right, and be that storyteller. And to your point, come in and edit that later. And that's really where the magic takes place, right? As long as you can get that rough draft down. But for me, it's never going to go soup to nuts. I never, ever, I'll always start with the beginning. I can already tell you what the ending's going to be. And I'll make sure that we got two really sharp hooks, right? And then I do the best I can with the middle. But I don't ever write it linear, which is cool that people, there are some people that do that, But poetry, fiction, short stories, nonfiction. There was a time 10 years ago somebody said, listen, jack of all trades, master of none, pick one. 85% of my readership is female. I write to a female audience. I write tearjerkers, for the most part. I like to say feel-good tearjerkers, right? You're never gonna come to the end of my book and be like, oh my God. Feel good, but emotional. They're gonna be emotional. I've actually been questioned because of my background and because I'm male, how can you write about a female character? The same way a female can write about a male character. It's called empathy. I'm never gonna pretend to understand how a woman thinks or why she does what she does, right? I had a mom, I've had sisters, I've been married, I have a daughter, right? I'm never gonna try, I don't have the same chemistry, right? I react to things very differently, but I'm an observer. And I watch the way that people act and react and what they say and don't say, and a lot of the stories told and what they don't say. So for me, I take a lot of criticism because of the genre that I write. You know, he's a guy with a military background. Like, what is he, you know? I'll read the book. If I don't make you cry, you get your money back. You know what I mean? That's pretty much my path. I've been at it for almost 25 years. When I really started having fun was going after endorsements. So I ended up getting Ed Asner to read The Changing Season, which was really cool. Richard Paul Evans. Now when I finish a book, what happens is I package the manuscript as if it looks just like a book. There will be at least 2 pages of pre-publication book reviews or endorsements, what we call endorsements. So if you think about it, and when I teach people how to write, I should say when I teach people how to get published, because I don't think I can teach anybody how to write. That was my 4th grade teacher, right? To be published is all about mitigating risk, right? Because it's a business. So when you think about it, I am going to write the best manuscript that I can. It is going to be pristine, meaning there cannot be any typos. Misspell words, no. The only time I tell anybody to spend any money in this industry is with a copy editor. If you have to spend $3 per double-spaced page, if that person is on their game and they're really good, male, female, it doesn't matter, and it doesn't matter where they come from. I suggest the United States only because it's a cultural thing, right? But I have spent $1,500 to have a manuscript edited. When it comes back, it is what we call camera ready. Titles are tentative. Publisher picks the title. I always suggest the best title that I can. Covers, for a publisher, tentative. You can suggest them, but they pick the cover. I spend a lot of time on the cover. I basically package this thing so that when you pick it up, you're like, wow, it won't take much to get this done, right? You flip it over, here's my dedication, my acknowledgments, and here's 2 pages, and not to be pretentious, but people who are either #1 New York Times bestsellers or people that are in the industry in some way, shape, or form, so that you don't have to take my word for it. Take those 20 people. They've read the book. It just helps with the marketing and everything else later on, you know what I mean? So I've learned a lot of shortcuts as we've gone along, but another thing, I think the thing that I like least about it is I love to connect with people. I'm very social, right? Social media has been fantastic for me for the books. Social media is also the devil, right? It's absolutely horrible, the stuff that goes on in there, right? If you put anybody in who writes or has a book out, if you put it on Goodreads, what they tell you is, put it out on Goodreads and never go back and look at those reviews. People are cruel, right? Amazon's a little more legitimate, Barnes & Noble's more legitimate. Goodreads is a way for people that want to write a book, have never written a book, to actually tear you down, and it's the truth. But for me, it used to be a lot more of this, and now it's a lot more of this. So book bloggers, book reviewers, getting endorsements online, working in social media, Twitter, Facebook. And you have to continue to pump that stuff out, right? Where it used to be, you'd show up at events and just talk, and it didn't matter how many people there, you need to make connections with people, right? So that's starting to change too, which isn't good. So I get out whenever I can just to talk to people. And you make connections. I've talked to people, 10 years ago, and somebody, oh, I saw you 10 years ago, you was, and then you make that connection. And I think that's starting to change in the industry, which is pretty terrible. I've talked quite a bit, and a lot about nothing when you think about it, really, when you get right down to it. I'm joking. I'm going to open up for questions. What do you guys have for questions? And it could be about anything. It's writing, publishing.
What's your start point usually? Is it character or plot?
For me, the plot line is 1 or 2 sentences, right? So two brothers, two estranged brothers get in a car to go spread their father's ashes across country, right? Done. Plot's done. Character, character, character. It's just so, it's so intense. And if you look at some of the authors that have really made it, one of my downfalls is I've never written a sequel. So if you go on Amazon right now, there's 750 reviews of The Rocking Chair. And a lot of the reviews are saying, hey, when's the next book? I mean, it's almost like cheating, right? So you have the same characters, you have the same scene setting, you have to change up the plot, so it's a different plot, but everything else is there, even the dialect in which they speak, right? All the research that I put into it, which I absolutely love to do with the books. Probably the smartest thing I could do is take some of the and I may do it when I'm a little bit older, but to take some of the books that have done better and actually create a sequel for them. Because if you look at a lot of writers that have really succeeded, they'll take a character, it's not even based on the book or the plot line, it's the character, right? And then, oh, what's going to happen to the character next? And they always leave it open-ended. I hate it. I hate it. You want to tell me a story, finish your story, and we'll get on to the next story, right? And that's just my own, prejudice or whatever. But really good question.
Would you consider rewriting your first books that you were?
Yeah, I'm going to tell you, The Unexpected Storm, which was one of my first, I don't think I would change a word of that because of, it was, first of all, it's nonfiction, but it was a story that was very raw at the time. There were certain, there are certain things that you can write at a certain point in your life. Three Shoeboxes, I couldn't have written that 15 years ago. People would have thought I was either homicidal, suicidal. I was, enraged because of everything that I was going through at the time, right? I was going through a divorce and the whole family court thing. It was absolutely awful. Separate yourself a few years, separate yourself 10 years, and then suddenly it's like, I remember it, but I don't feel it, right? So I can tell it in a different light. The prison book would probably be the only one, right? But for me, I would have to really, really fictionalize it, But I think, and again, that's an industry that people don't know as much about that they should.
It's like having one in your pocket.
Right, right.
Dry spell.
Yeah, exactly. My curse is that people ask all the time, right, what's the hardest thing for me? It's time, right? It's never ideas. For whatever reason, I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse, but I'll be in the shower and I'm like, oh my God, I should write about this. All right, so where's the next 6 months, right? I need another 6 months to do that because I'm working on this and that. There are people that work on multiple projects at one time. I cannot. And the reason I can't is because if I feel as passionate as I do about these characters, not just the storyline, the characters, I can't leave them and get on to another family. When I'm done, I'm done. But again, that's not to say that it doesn't work that way for other people, So, other questions? Does anybody want to know why this plastic's down on the floor?
The plastic's on the floor.
Like this is a potential crime scene, and I know I probably just shouldn't say that because we're on TV, but.
It was a gingerbread making workshop, and so.
All right.
They covered the floor, and then there's going to be a New Year's Eve party.
Well, when I walked in here, Pammy, I was thinking Sopranos. You know what I mean?
I keep feeling like I'm stepping on bubble wrap.
Yeah. If you guys had rubber gloves on, I would have walked out because this is like a setup from The Sopranos. What else? Go ahead. Oh, go ahead.
I think one of the problems, challenges I faced is this issue of getting influencers to discover you, to be willing to take time on you.
Yeah.
It's a real challenge.
Yeah, it is.
You can contact bloggers,
Right.
but unless you're selling 10,000 books, most of them aren't going to do that.
Well, I'm going to tell you something. It depends on whether or not your stuff's good. So let me give you a little hint. If you bring in guest speakers for your writer's workshop, I'd like to come in and speak, right? And not speak, set it up in a round, right? And talk about what I do and how I do it. And I can teach you how I do it. More than that, and it's like anything else in the world, right? It's about networking. It's about who you know. I tell people all the time, if you need my help, I will help you. People ask me, hey, can you edit my book? Sure, I can edit your book if you can paint my house. Because I was planning on painting my house, now I have to do this. So there's a certain limit. But if you say, hey, Steve, can you read a piece of this? What do you think? I would be honest, right? Well, I would ask you, do you want kindness or honesty? Right? And sometimes they're one and the same, and sometimes they're not. And for me, I have surrounded myself with people that are brutally honest. I have a friend who's not a devil's advocate. He's the devil. You know what I mean? But this guy makes me better, right? So in your case, it would be about networking. So if I said to you, hey, friend me on Facebook, you're kind of crazy if you don't, because if you do, I'm going to introduce you to other writers, right? And that's the way it works. So when I first got started, conferences, workshops, I would show up. I'm not a shy person by any stretch, but I would get involved in these discussions, right? Like I love the whole writers group thing, it's awesome, right? But you need to bring in stuff from the outside, and it's really about networking to make that stuff happen. One thing I caution people is you have one shot at this per project. If you come to my publisher, suppose you say to me, hey, listen, I want you to read this, Steve, I read it. Awesome, needs an edit. Probably a 99% chance it's going to need an edit. The last book that was unedited that went to a publisher was Truman Capote, In Cold Blood. Everybody else gets torn up. So get in the boat, we'll row together, right? But I'll read it, I'll say, listen, is it done? And I think it's done. Then it's not done. Is it done? Because for me to help you, you have to be done. You have to be copy edited, or copy edited. You have to, it has to be pristine. I can help you with the pre-publication stuff, right? And actually introduce you to bloggers and reviewers. Right now, if anybody in here wanted to do it, I have a friend, and actually she's based out of North Providence, and it's called, she actually has two, but one is called Partners and the other one is Providence Book Tours, right? Basically, years ago, I had a book that would come out, we'd go from, Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard, hit all the mom and pop shops and work our way up to Maine. So I'm making $600 on a book. I'm spending $6,000 on hotel rooms, and but the kids loved it. We had a blast. You know what I mean? But the bloggers, they have opened up an entire world. So for every blogger or reviewer that reads your stuff and likes it, suddenly you have their readership. Do you know what I mean? And you can meet them through me. And I tell other people the same thing. It is about networking. I've been doing it for 15 years. I used to teach at the Learning Connection, and it's funny. I'll say to people, if you need something, if I can help you, I will. And if you can help me, I'm going to ask. And usually it's not for me, it's for you, right? And then 12 years down the road, suddenly you're published, you're having all this, success, and then somebody else walks into the room and I say, hey, listen, she needs your help. And this is what's devastating to me. You would be surprised at the people that will say no. Which is fine, but you have one shot. So that book, when it goes in front of Lou Aronica, whoever I can help you with, one shot. I'm not the, and this is where the rejection rate is 97%. If I am an editor and I say to you, I do not want fantasy, I do not want westerns, and I do not want love stories, and you send me a love story that's, takes place in Arizona on a horse, and then you wonder why I rejected you, and it's that craziness that goes on, you know what I mean? But I'm more than willing to help, you know what I mean? And for me, I've had, I've sold 100,000 books across my list. I've done well with the awards, all this, but I'm just getting started. I'm still learning and doing everything I can, right, to get there. But I also understand when somebody first gets started, it's even harder. So hopefully Pammy will bring me in, we can talk about stuff. But it's really, it's about the network.
It's been in my mind. The group is it's a well-established group at this point.
Yeah.
We do have people who come and go, but we do have a core group. James's wife is in it.
Awesome.
We have Cheryl's in it. Cheryl just joined. And
Fantastic.
like 6 or 7 people who've been coming from the beginning. And among those people, James is now published. Maddie's just about published. Katie's just about published.
Wow.
So
That's awesome.
it is.
That's really cool.
A lot of it is self-publishing, but with Katie it's not. So
Some of the best books I've read.
She's here tonight. She's an inspirational young lady.
Awesome.
But if you come.
No, I'd love to compare. And for me, self-publishing, here's the problem. This is the kind of mark on self-publishing, unfortunately. It's the people that refuse to put the work in, right? Or refuse to get that book copy edited, right? So there's nothing worse for me than if you think about it, I work, I have my family, everything comes first. I also love to read. So in the summertime, if we go down to Falmouth for a week, I'm going to sit on the beach. Fortunately, the kids are old enough where they can kill each other, and I just kind of monitor that. But I can read. I'll read 3, 4, 5 books. Oh my God, God be with you if I'm reading a book, and I don't care if it's self-published, traditionally published, where all of a sudden, like the grammar's off, there's typos, you're using multi-syllable words. Like if I have to go to the dictionary 3 times, I'm not here for a vocabulary lesson, right? I'm here to either be entertained or to learn. Most cases on vacation, I'm there to be entertained, right? The problem with self-publishing is people will not put in the work. They're so anxious to get their book published versus, hey, take the time, make sure that this thing is clean, crisp. It does not matter. Make sure the cover is what you're going to be proud of 20 years from now. But you'd be surprised at how many people want to, just fire that thing up, right? So I'd love to come in and talk. And for me, it's not, the writing is a very personal thing. I laugh all the time. People are like, well, can you teach me how to, I was at a book signing down the Cape. I watched an elderly woman walk in. She's holding onto the arm of another woman. I could see that there's some visual impairment there. A couple people waiting to get a book signed. I said, if you can just give me a second, please. I need to say hi. I go over to, I give her a hug, and I kissed her. Her name is Mrs. Parsons, my 4th grade teacher. And I said, thank you for teaching me how to write. And she had as much influence on me as anything else, right? You learn how to write when you read. You learn how to write by practicing and putting the seat time in. So for me, what I can teach, and hopefully inspire a little bit more than teach, is it can be done. I've done it. Without agents, without public, I've done it, right? So if you see a certain path for yourself, let's sit down and talk about it, right? But it's about getting published, right? And if you want to do it yourself, then treat it like it's a business, right? And do it professionally. And that's the problem with self-publishing. And hopefully it comes around. And Amazon's, they're putting them out. 10 years ago, 60,000 books a year would come out. They're almost double that now, right? You don't even need a physical book anymore. My wife buys me a Kindle a couple years ago. I don't know if it was a threat or whatever, right? But I love to sit in a chair. I like the smell of a book. I like the feel of a book. It doesn't have to be mine, any book, right? And then I pick up a Kindle and I buy the book that's, retails at $20, $19.95 for 99 cents. And I can put 2,000 books, right? That weighs 2 pounds. And then you wonder why the industry has changed. Seems like a great idea until you're the author and my book's up for sale for 99 cents, right? And I'm getting 15% of that, sometimes 8%, depending on the contract that's been dealt out. So it's brutal. It's a brutal industry. But if I was up here talking about making money, I would have failed miserably. Not saying I didn't make money, not saying we haven't traveled and had a great time with it, but the money has to be a byproduct of a passion, right? And when I talk to the kids, it's like, listen, think about this. It's the 3 Ps, and this is what I've lived my life by from 23 on. Purpose, once I found my purpose, passion, get up every day, really work hard at it, and perseverance, right? And I'm not trying, but every New Year's, people make resolutions. I laugh. I have a legal pad, and I have a list on the legal pad of everything I want to actually accomplish that year. There's no way I could ever accomplish these things, but I do a few of them. So I cross it off. I then take that list. I flip the page over. This is next year's list. Same stuff that was on there. Let me add some more stuff, right? So I know I'm going to sit in a theater someday and look at a big screen and watch a movie that I wrote with my kids. I know that's going to happen. I can't tell you how, right? But it's that whole, and it's funny, like it's so much easier to teach kids than it is to teach adults because we've all lived long enough to be jaded, right? And suspicious of things. I walk in, I'll be down the Cape and I'll be working with these kids and a little girl will hand me a poem and I'll read it and I'll say, oh my God, someday you're going to be a Pulitzer Prize winning poet. And she says, I know. And she does. And I say, imagine this. You're sitting at a mahogany desk and the line is wrapped around a city block in New York, and you're signing books. They can imagine that. So back it in, right? A lot harder for us to imagine that, and that's the difficulty with this, right? All those long nights where you pound and pound, like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? There's a reason you're doing it, right? For me, it's not what I do, it's who I am. And I know other writers that feel the same way, and I know other writers who aren't even publishing anymore and still writing. Have you guys seen that new movie on J.D. Salinger, Catcher in the Rye? There's a new, I think it came out, I don't know, it was 2017 or earlier this year. This dude was, off in center field, right? Or left field. He ended up publishing Catcher in the Rye. It was the last work that he ever published. I think he passed away when he was in his 90s, early 90s. He wrote every day of his life and refused to publish anymore because he didn't need somebody else's stamp of approval or the rejection that goes along with all this stuff, right? For him, the art form was pure. He didn't want it to be tainted. Harper Lee, To Kill a Mockingbird. Harper Lee, I'm going to tell you, when I said, as a kid, I read To Kill a Mockingbird, I'm like, oh, you know what I mean? Like, I got to read this book. I read it now, literary perfection for me. They asked her, why didn't you write another book? She said, I couldn't beat it.
And she did.
Well, the family did her wrong, right? Here's what a lot of people don't realize either. Her copy editor was brilliant. So the question was it something Watchmen?
Yes.
Go tell a watchman.
Yeah. Go Tell a Watchman was supposed to be the prequel, right? So she hands this to this copy editor, I don't know, I forget his name, and he says, "You're onto something, but this isn't it." And then she writes To Kill a Mockingbird. This was to be buried, but the family cashed in. It's just like Tolkien, right, with, Lord of the Rings. He never ever wanted a movie because, listen, if I have kids read these books, they have to imagine what a hobbit looks like. Now suddenly I have to imagine what a hobbit looks like. You're telling me what it looks like, right? Well, I'm not on my phone texting, right? Crazy. So for me, it's like however you started, remember that. Do you know what I mean? And I have to do the same thing. Every once in a while, if I feel like I'm getting stale or stagnant, I'll volunteer to go work with kids. And they're like, "Oh, Steve, we can't thank you enough." Are you kidding me? Like, it's really, in some ways, it's for selfish reasons because I sit there and then they look at it like, "Oh my God," and it's like, no. You know what I mean? Just to have that energy and to have that passion, I mean, that's what it's about. Yeah, sure.
I just have a question on research. When you're doing research for your book,
Yeah,
how do you go about it? And
very carefully. No, I'm going to tell you, that's a great question. I love to do the research. I think fiction, people say, well, I write reality-based fiction, so this is a story that actually happened. It did. It just happened to occur in my head, right? But I did so much research that I believed it. And once I believed it to be true, as if somebody had told me the story and I put it down. If I was independently wealthy, I would travel a lot, and I'll give you, actually, it's a great question, right? So Ashes. Father, biggest villain I've ever written in a book, and this is going to explain to you what I do. Unbelievable villain. This guy is just awful human being. He's not even alive. He's a character in the book, but he's not alive. He's in a vase. His ashes are in a vase. Two brothers, middle-aged, and the reason I wrote this book is because me and my brothers are reaching middle age, right? And we used to talk about college, and then we talk about girls, and then you talk about mortgages, and you talk about, and now it's like, oh, I have to go to the doctors. It's like, please, I don't even want to hear that stuff. So I put two brothers in the car. They're going to travel from Salem, Massachusetts to Seattle, Washington. I say to my wife, I look at the calendar. My daughter is a competitive dancer, right? So it's like raising Shirley Temple. She comes first. I have another guy that's in college. The other two are out of the house in the wind. So I'm limited. Not so much with resources for money, but I'm limited for time. So I said to her, listen, I want to research for this book, right? But I want to bring them from Salem to Seattle. Now check this out. I look at the calendar. There's no way I can pull it off. In order to do it the way I want to do it, I could fly to Seattle, but it's not going to make, I want to actually meet the people, talk to them, and kind of write about it in the book. So I go to AAA. I say, listen, my wife and I are planning a trip from Salem to Seattle. Can you map this out for me? So I take the maps, I put them on my dining room table, and then I start. This is where they start. So I start with the whole scenery in Salem. Of course, I do it around October. I'd be crazy if I didn't. And then as you work your way through, I use Google Earth. The internet is unbelievable. You can actually you can go into a hotel and actually look around the lobby of the hotel. So here's me. I just walked into the hotel. I got the two brothers here. One guy doesn't want to pay, to be in the hotel. He'd rather be in Motel 6. The other guy's like, I'm done. I'm so done being with you. And they walk in. There's 3 restaurants. Which restaurant am I going to pick? What's on the menu? And the research is just absolutely exorbitant. And I love it because it becomes almost like me and my brother went on a trip. Again, it's only in my head. He has no idea, right? But as we walk through, I'm like, yeah, you don't remember, you had a steak. I ended up eating the fish and, But it becomes so real to me that I love doing the research. People think that research is just for nonfiction. That's not true.
well, I think it's exciting.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's so much fun. And people want to rush that. Like for me, the research is like I'm writing a book right now. My father passed in September, right? So to honor my dad, I'm writing a book called 602 State Road, which is my childhood house, right? Address. The thing takes place in the 1980s. So here I'm online, right? Well, I remember we took my younger brother's Stretch Armstrong doll and played tug of war with it until we ripped one of the arms off, right? So let me look at Stretch Armstrong. And then all of a sudden, all the stuff from the 80s starts coming back. The Rubik's Cube, right? All the music, the movies, this and that. And it's not like I'm taking it and I'm putting it into the book like this. That's not what's happening. I'm actually creating notes, and I'm reading through the notes, and then I'm back in 1984, right? With my mother yelling, somebody needs to go get the laundry. You can hear the washing machine, spinning out of kilter. And you create that scene where you're like, yeah, I'm back, because I lived it, but I was a kid. Now to look at it as an adult and to go back, I love the research. Love it. In fact, I probably waited 2 months longer than I should to start the book, because I was just, like I was saying before, I was tinkering. I probably had 30,000 words of notes. Yeah. But just, my grandmother's split pea soup, right? That made me gag. You had to stay at the table, right, until you finished your meal. So, and then you create, but all the stuff that goes around that. So the clock, but it was the cat clock, right, with the tail like this and the eyes going back and forth. I wanted to rip the tail off. And then you create that scene where it's like, yeah, of course I'm in the 80s. But the reason I'm in the 80s is because I just spent 3 months researching the 80s, looking at old pictures, looking at the house, you know what I mean? And then you bring yourself back to it. That's the fun part. Don't rush it. Go ahead.
And do you have somebody edit your work?
Oh yeah, I have a copy editor.
How do you feel about that if they're trying?
Well, it always happens 3 times. So 602 State Road, I get done with the book, I put it in the bottom drawer of my desk or wherever, someplace I can't get to it, right? And I wait between 4 to 6 weeks, usually closer to 4 because I'm chomping to get back at this thing, right? But I can't see it. Once I finish it, because as I'm writing, and this is another funny thing, I can't type. I hunt and peck, right? So it slows my roll down. I love it. Slows me down enough where I can actually edit as I'm going, right? I leave it alone, I come back the next day, I look at what I wrote the day prior to, and then I go through it. Once I finish a chapter, I go through the whole chapter. Done. I'll get back to you. Let's get on to the next thing. And again, I'm going off a storyboard, which is basically an outline on steroids. But as I come through it, when I get done with it, I put it in the bottom drawer. I come back 4 to 6 weeks later, I actually do an edit on that, right? And then it goes to a copy editor. From a copy editor, it goes to 3 proofreaders, right? So this thing is clean. But the copy editor is not, oh, Steve, you forgot the, dot an I and cross a T. What happened to this character in chapter 4 that doesn't, reappear until chapter 7? So it's all about, plot lines that have gone wrong, character holes, that type of stuff. But for me, the toughest thing was to find somebody that you could work with, right? That had the best intentions in mind, right? So there are people, don't get me wrong, that are absolutely brilliant at this, and it's a different art form. There's writing and then there's editing. I know some editors who are frustrated writers, and I know some editors who have a God complex. So, Steve, this is a fantastic book, but until I put my hands on it, which clearly is the hand of God, this isn't done. Terrifying. So it took me years to actually find the right people where it's like, this guy's tough on me, but his best intention, he understands this is my story. This is the essence of who I am, right? He's just saying, hey, let's kind of make it more concise, that type of thing. The magic's in the editing. I think if you looked at every rough manuscript, you'd be like, wow.
Some publishers, even indie publishers like Solstice, will assign you an editor.
Yeah, which is fantastic, if it's a good connection,
Yeah.
right? It's like trying to get a therapist, right? And you walk out of the office, you're like, ooh, I'm in worse shape than I was when I came in. You know what I mean? You don't want that with a manuscript, because when it comes back, I had a friend of mine who was writing horror. I don't really particularly like horror, right? Good luck trying to beat Stephen King, but it looked like somebody had actually got into a motor vehicle accident and bled on this manuscript. That's how much red was on it. So I said to him, we went out for a drink, and I said, Mike, does the editor like horror? No. Good for you. And you hired somebody that hates the genre. You know what I mean? So it's a tough deal. Any other questions? Because if there's no other questions, they've asked us to do a song collectively. You know what I mean? It could be a Christmas song, Hanukkah song, whatever you guys want to do.
Christmas, I don't know any.
There is the dreidel song. Called Mrs. Parsons. She taught me that. Yeah, it's been fun. It's cool to break it up, but the fun for me is actually in the writing. I love the process. And it still surprises me that I can finish one, right? I think if it wasn't so challenging, I wouldn't do it. I'd go find something else to do. But because it's so difficult, and it's like, you know what I mean? But it's me competing against myself. Other people are like, oh, you're a lot like this other writer. I really don't care. I'm just hoping that my next book is better than the last one I wrote, right? And when people, what's the best book you ever wrote? The one I'm working on, obviously, right? We're going to keep going that way. So Cool part for me is I had boxes made up years ago, 4 boxes for my kids, and it was from a Finnish carpenter up in Maine, all velvet lined, and I thought I had purchased big enough boxes. And at the time, they were manuscripts, so I inscribed the manuscripts. This is what it took me to do this, go chase your dream. This is what it took me to do this, go do this, that type of thing, right? Every time the book got published, the manuscript came out, I put the book in. The boxes are full, right? And only 2 of them have received the boxes. The other 2 are still too young, right? And this is my way of saying, crack the lid, and I have this, little plaque on it that says, enjoy the journey. But some people say, well, you've won these awards, you have these endorsements. And I'm not saying it's not cool, right? But I've actually created a life worth living, right? I remember looking back on the desert and thinking, there's nothing wrong with law enforcement. It's fantastic. It's a noble profession, right? There's nothing wrong with the military. It's awesome. I take great pride in the fact that I did both, right? But I wanted to do something that I wanted to do, right? I wanted to chase this dream down. And it hasn't been easy, but I think if it had been easy, it wouldn't have been worth it, do you guys hear a song, or is that just in my head? Yeah. Do you hear something? Because it's still trying to regulate medication for me. Go ahead.
Do you have, at this point or in the past, over the years, do you have manuscripts sitting that have never seen the light of day or seen anybody's?
That's a great question.
Because I'm just curious, because you seem so prolific and you seem to write quickly. At this point, I'm just curious if you have a box somewhere.
Here's the. I'm actually afraid to even. Can you just turn that off, like witness protection for now? 10 years ago, the answer would have been yes. The answer right now is no. And the reason for that is this. I call it rollover. When I start a book, I have a different file that's called the dump, right? So I'm working on 602 State Road. So here's 602 State Road. I think it's sitting at like 62,000 words. I have 602 State Road dump, which started off as Ash's dump. So I'm rolling everything over that I couldn't use, right? And then I look at it and I still can't use it. I can't use it. I may not use it for another 7 books, right? And it's a large file. So when I go through it, it's like maybe, God, no, God, no, God, no. I bring it to the back. I could probably use this. I can probably use that. And then what will happen is during the editing phase for 602, I'm going to end up removing probably 20,000 words.
Like scenes or?
Yeah, everything. Scenes, it could be dialogue. It's just, sometimes it's the thing just didn't fit, right? And there are sometimes, it's inspired by a bottle of Grey Goose, right? So it could be the best writing I've ever done, but it doesn't fit into, that particular piece, right? So years ago, the answer was yes. Today, I don't have any full pieces that haven't been published because I've actually taken from Peter to give to Paul, right? Because my voice is my voice now. Years ago, if you looked at a book, it was isolated and contained, so everything was in that book. Now, when I write a book, even though the storyline is different, the characters are different, it's my voice. You can tell it's me writing I can tell, you know what I mean? My kids can tell, Like, Dad, this is awful. Go ahead.
So what's the 62,000? Is that your goal, is to do 62,000?
No, I'm going to tell you, it used to be anywhere between 65 to 90,000 is considered industry standard, what we call a beach read, right? There's certain people like J.K. Rowling who can write, biblical, epic type novels and get away with it. The rest of us cannot. And the reason for that is, if you don't have a readership already established, nobody's going to invest the time or the money to read a book that's 500 pages, for starters. 2, this is a business. So if you want print copies of a book, they're not printing 500 pages unless you can go sell 50,000 and prove it out, right? So electronic copies, very easy, you know what I mean? For me, my wheelhouse is between 65 and 85,000 words. 12 months came in at like 72,000. Ashes comes in around 80,000, kind of on the high end. This is what I can tell you, and it's really through experience. When that story's done, it's done. And if it comes at 62,000 words, there will be people that will criticize it and say, oh, this is kind of a short novel. Or you can have me write fluff for another 5. And I'm not going to write fluff anymore. I don't know what I said anymore. So I think that there's enough left in the story where I can probably tag on another 10,000 words, but it's all in the fun. It's fun now. It's all framed, and you know what I mean? And now it's, hard copy. I still do stuff by longhand, not a quill pen, but, no candle, but I enjoy the process. And I get excited when it's like, I have this to do, and then I have 4 hours. oof. I'm going inside my head, you know what I mean? And a lot of times it's like that commercial with the NFL, right? Where the wife's kind of yelling, he's like, yep, yep, yep. When I get done with the book, I apologize to her. Hey, listen, I know we were talking about something. I didn't really catch what you said. You know what I mean? I'm joking. But, you know, it's true. You have to try to separate, right? And there was a time early on where, you know, I'm busy, I'm doing this. I can't, you know what I mean? If the dog's got to go out, I get up and go bring the dog out, right? If the kid's trying to talk to me about homework, I close this. Because it's so easy to fall into that trap where this becomes more important than that, and it can't be. You know, but early on, it becomes an addiction, right? So you're like, oh my God, I'm at 40,000, I'm at 45,000, I'm at 52,000, like this book's almost there. And really, the closer you get to finishing it, for me, I get all OCD. Like I need to, like I'm gonna get hit by a bus or something, right? So I need to finish this, I really don't, you know? So I've kind of learned how to slow my roll a little bit and pace myself and really to try to enjoy it. The downside to creating that much work is people ask me, did you enjoy Gooseberry Island? I don't know, I was working on another book, right? So they've gone from one to the next to the next, even when they've succeeded. So I'm out, you know, giving talks or I'm at an awards or whatever, right? And then it's like, but people are like, oh, let me talk to you about Ashes. Ashes is done. For me, it's done. It's not done for the reader, so I have to open myself up to that. But people say, well, listen, I really like this, but everything that follows but kind of takes care of I really like this. You sit in a writer's group and somebody says, hey, James, this is what I think about this. It's a manuscript, it's not published yet. Information is invaluable. You like this, you hate this? Okay. And I don't say that to be like, of course I want people to like my stuff and I have a readership that expects certain things. It's hard for me now to write something that's going to surprise people, right? Because I have the same people that are, you know, buying my stuff. Right? And really my demographic again is women, you know what I mean? So if I start throwing in the swear words and all that, the violence, I can't do that stuff anymore, you know what I mean? And I wouldn't. Any other questions? Anything from the back? Maybe from the production staff? No?
So how about on average, what's it take time-wise?
Right now about 6 months for me.
Is that a goal for a book?
No, about 6 months. And again, it used to, like, this is funny. If you listen to Stephen King will say, to write a book in its entirety, it should take you a season. 3 months. Fall. Book should be done. Start in the beginning of fall, should be done at the end of the fall. We're also talking about somebody that does this full time, who's a multimillionaire, and has a staff surrounding him. So, awesome. I hope someday to get to 3 months. For me, with the schedule I have, especially with the kids coming first, and I still have that day job, so 6 months is a pretty good deal, you know what I mean? But 6 months to say it's done, right? But then copy editing, pre-publication endorsements, book reviewers, book bloggers, stop piling all that stuff on, right? Long before this book is ever released, 90% of the work's done, right? My marketing and promotion's already set sail, right? I'm gonna get together with Pam, we're gonna talk about her book, and really about, these are the things that you need to do, these are the things that would be nice to do, right? The more you do, obviously, the more chance you have at grabbing other readers, but it's all about time. Not so much money, because I've learned how to do it without money for the marketing, but it's about time. How much time do you want to put in? And you pick and choose, you know? Like I'll do an event, sometimes there'll be 40, 50 people in the room, good. I do, you know, not as many people tonight. It's being filmed. It plays very well on social media. There's benefits to everything. And even if I pick up 2 or 3 readers tonight, it's worth it for me. And it's local, you know what I mean? There are times where something will come on the calendar, hey Steve, can you go speak here? No. Right? Because if you look at the time that it's going to take to do that, or am I getting paid to do that type of stuff, right? So you have to start weighing some of the stuff out, you know?
So what do you mean about the marketing? Like, I figured out how to do the marketing without it costing anything. What, can you talk about that a little bit?
Are you in the writers group?
She just
Well, I
joined.
just joined.
Well, congratulations. I'll be coming to speak. And what I'll do is I'm going to share, they're not so much templates, it's just a process that I use.
In the spring, what do you think, Steve, the spring?
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, I'd like to, maybe I can have a new outfit, like maybe you know what I mean?
Yeah, shorts.
Like a jumpsuit or something, you know what I mean? Some active wear.
Spandex.
Well, I could, but that's just another scene in the book that nobody wants to read, you know what I mean? Any other questions? I could go on all night, but thank you very much for coming out. I appreciate it. I really do. Thank you. Thanks.